I felt like I thought of democracy as this abstract historical achievement that was kind of going to just protect us. I like to say like a self-cleaning litter box.
Teacher's like, okay, everybody, all right, pop quiz time. We're going to do the vocabulary quiz. And I just yell out, wait, I got to make my cheat sheet.
I like to joke that I make my living throwing away dead people's sex toys.
I can guarantee you there is nothing you have felt that I haven't felt.
Yeah, and I am a formerly miserable person.
If people don't know how you are, they cannot help you.
Anxiety is the rattling of the lid on the pot of boiling water.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's connected, like me letting go of the past, me not hanging on to my anger, me like trying to become a present being.
You're not in your peak dieting phase now?
I mean, I was only in it for like a quick 6 minutes on a car ride once because I was in between.
Can we stop for snacks?
Yeah, I was equidistant between 2 fast food places.
So that if I'm in a situation with like my older daughter and she says something hurtful to me, like you're wearing a lot of statement jewelry right now.
In the very, very niche world of American ghost towning, my dad is a minor celebrity.
Well, we have 50% of the country's in dire poverty, is in homelessness. You know, LA is
50% of the country is in homelessness. That seems like not a correct statistic. Hi there, my name is Sean Conroy. I am a writer and a comedian living in Los Angeles, California. I'm trying to figure out how to get happier. So I've started this podcast to look into some of the stuff that is making me less happy, sometimes even unhappy, and to get people to help me figure out why that is and what I can do about it. I'll be honest, one thing that's been bothering me a lot lately is the whole political situation here in the United States. I don't know if you have heard about this, but we are living in tumultuous, tempestuous, turbulent times. Maybe I'm just paying more attention lately, but man, this is some fucking crazy shit. So I wanted to talk to somebody who knew something about it. My guest today is a journalist and an activist. She wrote a book about politics called How to Start a Revolution. I guess the book is primarily aimed at young people. It's right in the subtitle, which is Young People and the Future of American Politics. But in case you can't tell by the richness of my voice, my mellifluous tones, I am not young, and I really enjoyed the book. So here it is, episode 2 of Sean Conroy Gets Happier with my guest, Lauren Duca. You want us to start a revolution, basically. Not us. I'm not a young person, but you want young people to start a revolution.
Well, what I want is equitable public power, which really means every person having equal political footing. And I think that every person has a right and duty to the political conversation, but I have zeroed in on young people who are having an experience of a political awakening because young people are the future. And I think that as we go through this shift and inhabit more leadership positions, that increasing kind of the voice of youth in politics is the most efficient way that I can contribute to that shift.
Mm-hmm. So young people are the future. I like that. But it seems like if that's the case, I'm just extrapolating from that statement. If young people are the future, that means that middle-aged people are the present and old people are the past. And it seems like old people are the people who are in charge most of the time.
Well, young people being the future is just a matter of the progression of time. Mm-hmm. So that is what I mean by that is that increasingly this generation, the millennial generation, will be in leadership positions. It's very funny to me. There's always these articles along the lines of millennials are in leadership positions in fashion. What is going on? And it's sort of like, well, time is progressing.
Mm-hmm. And that's always been true. I feel like pop culture and fashion and things have always been the purview of the young, in a sense.
Well, and I guess also, to be clear, I studied kind of a demographic level shift that we can talk about at generational scale. And a big way that we can think about the characteristics that define millennials comes from social political factors throughout history that we have experienced as a cohort. And so, for example, millennials tend to be very altruistic and to want to leave the world a better place than we found it. That instinct has been informed by privatized volunteering, institutionalized give back trends in culture, and things like baby boomers starting Points of Light and Bush administration, Teach for America and Habitat for Humanity, and National Honor Society, and all of these sort of highly incentivized volunteering opportunities have made it so that, in general, millennials want to give back. And so I like to think about that because we can actually, as millennials, then rise to power, hopefully create the shift where young people that come after us understand their right and duty to the political conversation through the policies we enact and through our leadership styles that hopefully shift to providing agency to each and every person through kind of establishing that right and duty to the voice and making it accessible and actually expanding democracy rather than the system we see now, which tends to not invite us to the table and then chastise us for not showing up.
Right, which is like a weird dichotomy. And you talk about that in your book, where there's this perception that people are apathetic, but then there's also active, I guess I would say sort of active discouragement from participation by the people who are in charge.
Yeah, so I actually experienced this political awakening when Trump was elected. I was rocked into this sense of self-determination, and I felt as if I understood my concrete role in government by and for the people, and that required my input. And we're told kind of this story about youth apathy as if that's a natural extension of low voter turnout statistics. But I found that there's a really important distinction between apathy and alienation. And alienation is this state in which you think you can't, and so you don't, in which you feel like you can't make any difference, and so you shouldn't even bother. And that's actually overwhelmingly what young people I spoke to who have self-reported the political awakening talked about as their before state. And so it wasn't a matter of all these young people who, after the election, decided to start nonprofits and run for office, or just fundamentally reshaped their approach to politics to become active participants. It wasn't that they suddenly started to care. They weren't like, oh crap, like I'm not self-involved anymore. Mm-hmm. They thought, oh, I'm not waiting for permission, and I'm going to do the thing that I've been waiting for someone else to do, or waiting my turn to do.
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, I guess this is the first thing you said, where you're like, oh, somebody else will do this, so I don't have to.
Right. Or the people in charge, hopefully eventually. And like that speaks to kind of my before state as well, where I felt like I thought of democracy as this abstract historical achievement that was kind of going to just protect us. I like to say like a self-cleaning litter box. And it just sort of seemed, like things were slowly getting better, and Obama was president, and the gays were getting married, and there was going to be a woman in the White House. So like slowly we're getting to the big equality rainbow, and then record scratch, freeze frame, Donald Trump is president.
Right. What a day that was. I do feel like my attitude has always been, well, there's not really anything I can do. I am not part of the system. The system exists, and it's somewhere, outside of me or above me. And even by the fact that I don't know where you are. Oh, I guess, are you in New York right now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm in California. And so I was so excited the day that I went to vote for Obama. It was such a big deal to me just to personally cast my vote for him. But I also was very aware that in the large scheme of things, my vote meant nothing. If I didn't show up that day, it would not have made a difference to his ability to be elected president, you know? And I find that frustrating. And you know, now we have this other guy. And
right.
I find myself angry all the time and still feeling just as helpless as I was then, you know?
I think that is a common feeling. And you're absolutely right that it's interesting. I think we interrogated it with less of a sense of urgency under Obama because he was.
It was what I wanted.
He seems like a good guy. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think I was totally asleep in that state and felt similarly. I mean, even for my vote in the 2016 election, I was amped to vote for a woman.
Oh, me too. Absolutely, 100%.
You know?
Yep.
And I also felt like, you know, New Jersey, my home state, I thought it's going to go blue, whether I vote or not. It totally felt symbolic. And I think that a lot of people feel that way.
I mean, there I was with hundreds and hundreds of people waiting online at the polling place, and everybody was happy, and everybody knew what the outcome was going to be, and everybody was going to vote the same way, you know? And so it was that thing of like, this is great. I'm so happy to be doing this, but what's ultimately the point, you know?
Well, and also, you know, it really indicates a lack of actual freedom, and I think it's amazing because American patriotism is this world famous aggressive pride, right? Like, where else do you see flags being waved with that much ferocity? And we are so American exceptionalism is based in this idea that this is the land of the free. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And it's, well, hold on. Do you actually feel as if your voice matters? You actually feel as if your vote can impact politics? And what's amazing, I think, is that those two ideas can coexist. We literally set off fireworks about how free we are on the 4th of July, and yet also most people feel like, well, my vote's mostly symbolic. And I think that.
And by the way, be careful if you're setting off fireworks, because always there are bad things that happen to people on the 4th of July. Yeah.
Warning. Yeah. Warning, be careful about fireworks, and warning, we actually live in an oligarchy. But like for truly, it's just like amazing. And I was under that spell as well. Which is like, we have the kind of an abstract concept of freedom, and yet if we know that our voices aren't making any difference. And I would also add that our voices individually, because of the money in politics, gerrymandering, voter suppression, a geographically biased electoral system, and all of this other corruption littered throughout the system, and that this system that I identify in How to Start a Revolution as the political industrial complex, that makes it so that our individual voices are statistically non-significant.
Here was a thing that happened 200 years ago, and it made us great, and now we're great, and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Exactly.
And I was thinking about it in terms of, like, this is, you know, whatever. People can make fun of me for this, but I am training for a half marathon right now. And it's like, if I run that half marathon and then I go, well, I did it, I'm in shape, I'm good for the rest of my life. You know?
That's exactly it. It's connected to the way that the lack of a habit of democracy is directly hooked up to the way we learn about it. And I think it's such a good comparison to use the half marathon, because it is exactly like getting fit. It's the discipline of democracy is totally like the habit of staying in shape. And it's like a muscle that we have to flex, and also where you have to kind of pick uniquely what works for you. So at the end of How to Start a Revolution, I have a call to action and say, you know, voting is the most basic transactional element of citizenship, and like, for the love of God, everyone, please fucking register and vote. But then beyond that, we all have to kind of have our own democracy fitness regimen, and you might build it based on the same way you would think about fitness, right? So the civic actions, raising your voice, making your political opinions manifest with demonstrative behavior, that can include contacting elected officials, attending town halls, participating in a protest, right? These are all civic actions.
If you go to the right town hall, you could possibly challenge Joe Biden to a fist fight, I think. Right?
Fist fighting with Joe Biden. These are all civic actions. And so when you pick what works for you, when you pick your discipline of democracy, like, you should think about it like working out. Like, if you were sitting around on the couch and like you realize, oh shit, like I've put on some weight, I've been eating Cheetos, and like I'm atrophying playing video games or whatever is happening.
Can you see me right now? Are you looking at me right now?
The proverbial you.
Okay.
But you say, okay, I want to get fit. Like, what would you do? You would say, what is my schedule like? When do I have time to fit in a workout? What kind of workout is good for me, right? Like, maybe you do hot yoga, maybe you do CrossFit. Like, maybe you would start running a half marathon, and then you would also choose to prioritize that work and that habit. And I think, like, we have to think about the work of democracy and civic action like that, and it has to be prioritized. And we've been so alienated from that understanding. It's not that there's this flabby, lazy electorate that's getting out of shape because they don't give a crap. It's because we've been so pummeled into submission by the wealth and power being concentrated in the hands of the few, to the point where the public essentially doesn't have a voice.
Mm-hmm. And I also feel like, because I was accepting of the fact back then that, well, the work is done. Like, we did it. And then once you accept that as the premise, then the result of that is, well, this is just how it works. Like, yeah, your vote doesn't matter, but that's just how the system works. It's okay because the work was done hundreds of years ago. You know?
Well, and that's actually like the most crushing element of the state of alienation, is like this idea that that's just the way things are. And what's amazing is that, like, once you start probing that and asking questions, it's very quickly exposed how much of the bizarre secret rules that hold the political industrial complex in place are totally made up.
But I had, over the course of the previous year, started for the first time ever. I was never a person who did this before. I had started watching cable news, and not just CNN, but also MSNBC and the Sauron of cable news, Fox News, and just happened to catch that segment on Tucker Carlson. And I guess, that does make me want to ask you about that was such a crazy thing, but that was so de rigueur for the way he treats people that he disagrees with. And basically what he was saying in your interview was, not only do I disagree with your opinion, which fine, it's fine to disagree with somebody else's opinion, but it was like, you don't have a right to have an opinion about this.
Right. And the dismissal was based on, he said stick to the thigh high boots, meaning stick to fashion, stick to pop culture.
Ariana Grande. Yeah.
And the idea behind that is that feminized, non-serious interest could be disqualifiers to the political conversation. And I think, like, a really obvious, hilarious example of something we should challenge is, like, why is golf a serious authoritative interest, but shopping for shoes or nail art is considered somehow, too silly to be taken seriously. And I think, there's I in the book, I unpack the political industrial complex as an interconnected set of entities that consolidates money and power for the two parties in artificial competition, and then the interconnected set of entities, including the media and lobbyists, and the way that they cooperate to enforce this idea of the way things are. And then at a softer kind of cultural level, what radiates out from that industrial complex is filtered through the formulation of the white supremacist patriarchy. And a much more colloquial, simple way to put that is, if a white man in a suit walks in a room, he's automatically taken seriously before he even opened his mouth. And that's, I think, part of what the questioning is, where it's questioning why our votes don't fucking matter, for sure. And then questioning, I think, the shape of society, where I think a lot of people have an awareness, right, that racism is a problem in this country, that sexism is a problem in this country, that we need solutions for the climate crisis, right? And that yet we're like, well, but the world is ugly, and that's the reality. And I think part of the political awakening, the most important part is just asking why that is the case, and also understanding that kind of each of us individually is embedded in participating in and submitting to the status quo that makes it so this is just the way things are,
and therefore has responsibility for those things.
Yes.
I don't disagree with you. In fact, I very much agree with you that getting people involved and saying, I'm going to do something about this leads to good things. But let me, I'm not even going to say devil's advocate, but I'll just give you a flip side of that from my own experience, which is I've never gotten particularly involved in politics. In fact, I come from a very political family, and I feel like maybe at some point it was almost a choice for me to avoid it in some way.
Okay.
But when I was younger, at one time for a while, I was a public school teacher, and I became very involved in the union, and I was a union rep, and I worked, went to meetings at the school, and then went to meetings downtown. This was in New York City, and and so that was one thing. And then another thing that I got very involved in the last decade or so is, and these are very small scale compared to politics, but they are an impact on my day-to-day life, was the CoOp Board in my building.
Yes.
And the difficulty I had in both of those situations, and I guess this would change if more people were involved, is that I felt like the people who got involved and the people who were passionate were generally speaking fringe elements. I often found them to be people who knew that if they went to a union meeting, everybody had to listen to what they had to say for as long as they had to say it. And it always seemed like, and same thing was true with the CoOp Board, and it just always seemed like things didn't necessarily get done. So that was a whole other aspect of frustration with all that stuff is, here we are, we're in the position to have at least a little bit of say in things, and yet we're stuck with this mess,
Yeah, I mean, what were some of the bureaucratic logjams that you were facing? I mean, can you give me an example?
Well, I'll just give you one example, which is why I ultimately resigned from the CoOp Board and the SNIT. But it was, we were going to do some work on the appearance of the courtyard in the middle of the building. And we had open meetings all year where everybody was allowed to come and give their input. And, we met with contractors, and we got a variety of people involved, and we took bids, and we evaluated everybody's work. I mean, we did this was the thing, is that we did a ton of work, and obviously it's for the good of the community, not for anybody's personal financial benefit or anything like that. And then when the whole process was concluded, after over a year's worth of of all this work, we had the we had the annual meeting of all the residents, and people who had been allowed to come to all of the meetings and been involved in the process the entire time then decided, wait, let's take a step back. I think we need to, not even like we don't want to do this. It was like we need to reevaluate this, and everybody needs to be involved the entire time. And it just seemed like, well, then what was and I know I'm being really specific and nitpicky about what you're talking about, but I guess I'm just speaking to a general sense of like, you want to work with other people, but then all of a sudden you have to work with other people, you know? Even in the women's, you know, there was that whole thing in the Women's March where some people were taking credit for being in charge and then other people didn't like some of their policy. Like, there's just always going to be friction between all these people, you know?
Well, and so I think that that's another piece of what we, like, as a nation need to engage with better is conflict, where, you know, I also went on a personal journey of figuring out how to talk about politics to my Republican parents. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, democracy is building consensus from debate. And I mean, it sounds like that the co-op board experience was particularly frustrating, but like, I think we all have to.
I want to kill them, Lauren. I want to kill them.
We don't engage with people who disagree with us. Mm-hmm. But that is actually the fundamental work of a democratic process. And so, like, the better that we can get at doing those things in our microcosm, the more we can shift that culture overall. And I think that it doesn't just look like everyone be civil and pretend that all like that we have to just. It means having uncomfortable conversations. Right. And I think, like, having productive conflict, not just, oh, we all believe different things and we're all in our different corner and nobody's going to be, you know, nobody's going to yell at anyone else. It's not being polite. It's actually like engaging, giving your energy and showing up for the sort of productive debate and conflict that, like, actually produces compromise and solutions.
So you have worked on having these conversations with your parents. Can I give you again a real life example, and you can maybe coach me on how I could have handled this better?
Sure, I'll try.
So a couple years ago, I went on tour for a couple months. I went all over the country doing stand-up and improv and all kinds of things. And I ended up in Thanksgiving. I was in Austin, Texas, and my college roommate's best friend lived like 45 minutes outside of Austin. And so my friend was like, why don't you call him up? And I knew the guy a little bit. And he was like, why don't you call him up and go there for Thanksgiving? And I did. I went to his house. He was very gracious and invited me over for Thanksgiving. So I had Thanksgiving dinner with him and his wife and their 3 college-age kids. And it was great. We just talked about a bunch of stuff and whatever. And then the kids went to bed. The wife went to bed. The bourbon came out, and he sat down, and he somehow we got into, of course, I mean, this was the, you know, December of 2017. We started talking about Trump, and this guy said, just unequivocally, he said, there has never been a president in the history of this country as divisive as Barack Obama. And I said, you know, this bourbon is really good, but I have to go. I'm sorry. I can't have this conversation. But you're saying there is a way to have that conversation, but how do you do that, you know?
Well, yeah, you know, I think maybe an important qualifier is that the calculus behind deciding to do interpersonal work, and, you know, needs to emphasize sanity and self-care. So, you know, it sounds like maybe if the bourbon was out and you were in a stranger's house, you did the right thing going to bed. Right. I would say. But I think that.
But let's say we take those variables out of the equation.
Right.
And it's just that statement. It's somebody I know, and they say that. How do I then carry on that conversation from that premise, which is outside my ken, if I can use an old-fashioned word?
Right. So I think that the key is curiosity and asking questions. So I think there's two core things you want to think about when you're asking the right question, and that's how can you provide a safe way for someone to consider an alternative view? And also, how can you better understand their view by asking the question? And like the best possible question does both those things. But like, so you might start by just saying, oh, what makes you think that? Or have you considered that, I don't know, there's been a rise in motherfucking hate crimes, but and not getting aggressive, like not doing that, not saying it that way, right?
So
right?
I shouldn't just say, fuck you stupid dick.
Right, you resist the urge. So okay, I guess the important thing, and the reason I say that piece about the calculus is that, like, when you're deciding to do this, when you're deciding to do the interpersonal work, it's tough and it requires a lot of patience. And so you have to be like, okay, I'm really goddamn doing this, and I'm going to bite my tongue and be patient and like allow the space for this person to unlearn and relearn, hopefully, right, a more open-minded view, maybe approaching what I think our shared goal should be, which is equality. And deciding to show up for that is a big deal, because you need to have compassion and you need to have honesty. And I think, there's a lot of guides out there in terms of like ones with racial threads in them. Showing up for racial justice surge has a lot of good particular techniques and things to use. But I feel like that actual interpersonal work is so important, especially for white millennials who are newly awakened, to go to our baby boomer parents and kind of probe at the pillars that hold the white supremacist patriarchy in place. And that can be as simple as saying, like, hey, Dad, like, have you ever considered the fact that young Black men coming out of the same socioeconomic circumstances as young white men have statistically way less wealth? What could that mean? Like, instead of, hey, you're a racist old bigot, okay, boomer, what if you thought about it this way? And I think that, the habits of democracy and what raising your voice looks like can take all these different shapes. And like, one of the actions and rituals that you can do to participate in how we live together is trying to have those conversations.
Right. And of course, my problem always is that I have emotions, and my emotions get in the way. So I need to be more like Mr. Spock than Captain Kirk.
I don't know what that means.
Well, it's a good reference,
Okay, I believe you.
Yes.
So to be clear, when I tell you I was a formerly miserable person, I mean that I fucking hated my brain. Like, I did not want to be alive. It was becoming untenable, and I regularly thought about killing myself. Like, shit really fucking sucked. And my life externally was going very well. And so that made me feel even more rotten.
Right. Like, what's wrong with me?
What's wrong with me? I got to this click moment with a lot of help, including but not limited to ayahuasca. But I think that the most essential
thing we have to have you back on to talk about hallucinogens at some point.
Yeah, I'm a psychonaut, so we can for sure do that. But I think that the most essential thing that I figured out is that I have to self-validate, and I just did. I was so hijacked by my thoughts, and I didn't understand that I am not my thoughts, and I am the being that observes my thoughts, and that when I can take control of and be present with myself, I have to think I am good, I am deserving of life, and that is going to only come from me. And it's so wild, because I had heard it, like, people had told it to me up and down, like, from all different sources. You have to be nice to yourself, you have to be kind to yourself, if you can't, RuPaul was telling me, if you can't love yourself, how am I going to love somebody else? I just did not get it.
Oh, come on, RuPaul. Yeah, no, I understand.
Well, it was wild because like I was in my first ceremony, and the shaman said to me, Lauren, while I was freaking the fuck out and had to be like taken out of the temple, of course, Lauren, you are good. And I was like, oh shit, like that's the whole entire thing. But even in that moment, I still didn't fully get it. And I said to the shaman, oh yes, I want people to think that I am trying to do good. And the shaman was just like shook their head like, no, like what? It's like, no, I had to decide like I am good. And I was so like operating in externalities and so ridiculously consumed and concerned with what people thought of me. And like the anxiety parasite monster in my brain was always digging around for all of the evidence that I am the ugliest funhouse mirror fucked up version of myself, that I was trying to prove conspiracy theories that I was like a shitty goblin all the time. Wow. And it still work. And I think it's similar because it's sort of like the work of democracy, I think, like, and it's
never done.
And it's connected in the sense that, like, getting free requires, yes, you to be working your butt off all the time. And, like, so now I am consciously, actively processing against that parasite. And there's definitely weeks, like, especially during my period, TMI, when I'm like, oh, crap, this is really heavy. And it's, like, taking me such a heroic effort to kind of like get back online and like get on top of that self-validation thing. But and like the idea that it is work, I think the work of spiritual freedom is the same as the work of democracy, and it's hard and it's tiring, but it's the only choice for survival.
Right. Constant vigilance, as Mad-Eye Moody would say.
Yes, I know that one.
Okay. Well, when you said the thing about your period, I was like, to me, that's the same thing as Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk is to you, because I don't get the reference. So,
Yeah, I had to get you back.
You can find Lauren Duca's book, How to Start a Revolution, on Amazon, probably elsewhere as well. And you can find and follow her at Lauren Duca on Twitter and at Duca.Lauren on Instagram. I just started following her. She followed me back. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you. And let me know if you want to have the hallucinogenic version.
Oh, definitely. Definitely at some point. The executive producer of Sean Conroy Gets Happier is Lauren Dunitz. The field producer is Pete Galamaga. Our sound engineer is Aaron Brungart. The show was edited by Lauren Dunitz. The show was recorded at All Things Comedy Studios in Burbank, California. Please rate and review the show on iTunes, especially if you have something positive to say. Tell people about the show. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sean Conroy. Check out our Spotify playlist, Sean Conroy Gets Happier. We take song selections from every guest, so it's starting to become a little eclectic. Please subscribe to our RSS feed. See you next time on Sean Conroy Gets Happier.